Hi, welcome to the video. In today's video, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this re-released Tamiya Bruiser out for a run in the forest. Just before we get started and before it gets muddy and wet and everything, I just thought I'd explain one or two things. So you may notice that it hasn't actually got the same wheels and tyres on that they come stock, and whilst I think that they look okay, they're fairly rock hard. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to have some softer tyres on. So what I've done with this is I've actually narrowed the rear axle, because the way they come, the rear track is quite a bit wider than the front, and it was kind of something that I couldn't live with. And so what I did was I chopped it down and I put in the RC4 drive hex adapter kit as well. What I'll do is I'll post a link in the description to the instructions which I used roughly to do this with. The couple of things I would mention is that to chop the casing down, it was quite important to get a precise right angle. So what I did was I used an aluminium sawing block and a razor saw, and I did use the lathe to trim some of the parts down inside, and you'll see in the instructions kind of how that's done. In the instructions that are in the link, you'll see that the person used washers to make up for the fact that the axles were sticking out a lot. What I did was I actually trimmed the axles down, and I used a tap and die kit to increase the length of the thread, so I didn't have that problem. Just before we go out, I'll show you what it's looking like on the inside. I've actually kept this truck pretty standard, and so you can see underneath that the track and at the back and the front is about the same, and I'm much happier with that. The wheels that I'm using are some alloy ones which I've had for ages, beadlocks, and the tyres I'm using are the Proline hammers, which I think might have come with my original SCX10 axial truck. Okay, so just get the battery in and we'll be ready to set off for the forest. Dog's anxious for a walk, so I hope to get going pretty soon. Just try and get that in. That's it, that's sitting there nicely, plugged in. It's always worth checking to make sure that things are working before you go. Steering seems to be okay. And we're going backwards and forwards. I'm actually using the DX4S transmitter. So the medium speed, you'll see just the rear wheels being driven. And that's in the top speed. Right, we all seem to be ready to go. I found with this truck that locking the front and rear differentials are really best for running the forest. It's quite a heavy truck, and I did originally have a heavy puller motor on the front, but to be quite honest, it didn't really need it, and I did strip out one gear set inside the gearbox, and having too powerful a motor didn't help. Having said that, I did upgrade inside the gearbox with the slipper clutch, which I think for something as heavy as this and able to go down to such a low gear ratio, and the general kind of delicacy of the mechanics here, I think is probably quite a good idea. Anyway, without further ado, I think it's time we got going.